You've all probably died to Clancy at least once, but not this version, this version. But what if I told you that everything, and I mean everything about Clancy, used to be even stronger on his release? He might be a decent brawler right now, especially at lower trophies, but back in the days, Clancy was absolutely busted. So how did Clancy ended up in the position that he is nowadays, and why was his downfall fundamentally necessary for the health of the game? Hope you enjoyed the video, and let's start with his release.
Humans are overrated.
So, Clancy was released in the 1st of August of 2024, and back then, Clancy's stats were insanely superior. So, to start off, his level 1 form damage, instead of being 1200, was 1600, 33% more damage, and at level 2, he dealt 14.3% more damage, so instead of being 1400, it was 1600. Not only that, but his super cost at all levels was the same, and it was 5 hits. 5 hits at level 3 to get that super, it's insanely cheap. And even at level 1, you could get the super relatively fast enough so that you could defend yourself even at level 1. Not only that, but his super recharge rate was also way much better. Nowadays his super at level 1, it takes 11 hits to recharge himself, but on his release it took only 7 hits of that super to get the super again. And at level 3, it took 5 hits as well, so at level 3 on release, you essentially always had the super. Not only that, but his level 3 form was even stronger than what it is nowadays, believe it or not. He had a 8.5% faster movement speed, which actually is the equivalent to a Draco super. Clancy at level 3 had that much speed. On top of that, at level 3 he super dealt 28.5% more damage. And if that wasn't all, his second gadget on release also had a bug where it could actually stun enemies, similar to Maze's first gadget. The only thing that was actually worse at a time, it is the amount of tokens that it took to level up, where it took 2 extra credits to level up from level 1 to level 2, and 1 additional credit level up from level 2 to level 3, but that didn't matter. He was absolutely busted on release. So, obviously, with so much more advantages, so much more pure damage, he would receive immediate nerfs. On the 27th of August, so just a little bit more than 3 weeks after he released, he received quite a lot of nerfs. His super now costed 6 hits instead of 5 hits in all of his levels. His super damage was reduced from 1800 to 1520 at level 3, so no way near as much damage as it used to be. His recharge rate at level 1 and 2 was reduced from 7 hits to 11 hits, which is exactly what we have nowadays. And his recharge rate at level 3 was also severely reduced from 5 hits to 9 hits. Partially, this nerf is also because of the massive damage nerf that it received. So it essentially took almost an additional 100% hits to get the super pack at level 3, which is pretty insane. And finally, his second gadget bug, where he could stun enemies, was patched. Not that it changed much, this gadget nerf, because actually even with the bug, most people still prefer to use the first gadget, which gave you double tokens, which was very good to level up insanely fast. Now, at first the nerfs seemed pretty good and pretty reasonable, because they were, but the real question was, were they actually enough? And very quickly people realized, no, it clearly wasn't enough. And the problem was quite simple, honestly. You could level up very easily, because even at level 1, you could get the super in 6 hits, so you could get the super in the first 2/3 of the level 1, which At that level, that meant that you would already have an ability that could protect yourself against tanks and assassins. And if anyone tried to rush you, they would get severely countered and they would get even further punished throughout the entirety of the match because Clancy would level up a lot. Not to mention that because of these, you could even use the first gadget to double the tokens and level up even more tremendously fast. In some cases, completely skipping the level 2. So, Clancy was still viable at level 1, and his level 3 form was just insane. So much damage and so much super cycle ability that he just shredded through tanks and honestly, everything else. Even snipers couldn't deal with Clancy at level 3 because of his insane speed, super range, and just absolute disgusting damage. So, it was to no one's surprise that eventually he would get nerfed yet again. On the 14th of November 2024, Clancy would receive some pretty harsh nerfs. To start off, his level 1 damage was reduced from 1600 to 1200, which also led to the super cost being increased from 6 hits to 8 hits. His level 2 damage was also reduced from 1600 to 1400, which led to the super cost being increased from 6 hits to 7 hits. And the super damage at level 3 was further reduced from 1520 per projectile to 1400 projectile, which then led to a super recharge rate being reduced by 8%. Now, even though this recharge rate didn't actually nerf any real interactions, because Clancy would inevitably receive a hypercharge, these did nerf essentially the hypercharge recharge rates a little bit, technically. Now, these nerfs were absolutely devastating, especially the level 1 nerfs, because at level 1 Clancy was literally useless. He couldn't even kill a tick at level 1 with his 3 ammo, and that made it severely punishing to play level 1 Clancy. Not only that, because your super costed more, that also meant that at level 1 you had no way of defending yourself. And a lot of people actually didn't like this change because most of the people didn't really care about the level 1 and level 2, because what was killing them most of the times was the level 3, not the level 1. So it makes sense that most people were looking forward to a level 3 nerf, not to a level 1 and level 2 nerf. But in reality, the level 1 and the level 2 nerf were way much more impactful because getting the super that much later just really hurt Clancy at getting his tokens, which helped him to get to level 3. And level 3 also literally got nerfed, so that was also not really good. Dealing less damage with his super made him slightly worse at countering tanks, but realistically speaking, Clancy was still amazing at level 3. The issue was really just before level 3. At level 3 you have essentially the best brawler in the game, but at level 1 you have the worst brawler in the game. Now, you might think that with all of these nerfs Clancy was balanced, but some people still thought that Clancy was absolutely busted, because if they could get some good interactions with the first gadget, sometimes that was more than enough for them to get to level 3 very early, which was indeed a bit unfair. But overall, most of the community believed that Clancy was balanced. Regardless, Clancy would receive yet one final nerf that would practically kill the brawler completely. In the 10th of December 2024, the speed at level 3 would be reduced by 7%, going from Draco on his dragon speed to just very fast, which is the same as Max, Leon, and a lot of other brawlers. Now, why was this actually so bad? Well, this kinda killed Clancy level 3 versatility. The insane speed that you had at level 3 allowed you to even have favorable matchups against brawlers that actually outranged you. Because you were just so fast, you could actually approach the snipers and sometimes even dodge a couple of their hits. So the speed nerf, it was honestly just overkill, making the level 3 form even worse, essentially moving Clancy to the bottom of the D tier. The only reason why he wasn't even weaker than that, it was just because he was still really good against tanks, especially tanks that needed to expose themselves in order to get a kill. So Clancy was never useless, but man, everyone did a better job than him because he was just so unreliable. And if you think that's all, Clancy still received one final indirect nerf, which was the gadget rework. On the 25th of February 2025, gadgets got reworked, where instead of having just a cooldown, they actually have a limit of uses. And why did this hurt Clancy if neither one of his gadgets cooldown or insane? Well, that is very simple. The first gadget was amazing with just having 3 uses. That system favored that gadget a lot because you didn't need it to wait for a good moment to use the gadget really. If there was one good moment, just use the gadget to level up very fast because once you are at level 3, the use of the gadget, it's done. You will no longer need that gadget, so essentially you wanted to spam those 3 uses or 4 uses if you felt like of the gadget so that you could have actually maximum value out of those gadgets. So the gadget now working on a cooldown was not necessarily a massive nerf, but it definitely did not help. It did make the second gadget slightly more helpful, but no one really used the second gadget, so this was not a good thing for Clancy at all. And this just made it Clancy players even harder to get value off their character, which unfortunately would stay like that for a very long time, because even with the release of his Hypercharge on the 5th of May 2025, people quickly realized that it didn't change anything. It was one of those hypercharges that you could only get once a game, and history was essentially just repeating itself. How the hell are you meant to get a hypercharge that you can only get after reaching level 3? It's just insane that they actually decided to release that, because clearly Clancy wouldn't get any value from that. Most of the games, Clancy, against good players at least, he wouldn't even get close to getting the hypercharge, which really just didn't change anything at all, which was pretty sad to see.
A pinch.
Now, I usually wouldn't talk about these game modes, Brawl Arena, in general, but I genuinely believe that this game mode had an insane impact on Clancy's history. Brawl Arena had one major thing that helped Clancy more than any brawler in the game, which was that he could charge his tokens off the bots. That meant that Clancy would have level 3 essentially from the very moment he could get his super. Just use a super onto a bot and you are practically at level 3. And these made Clancy insanely busted on Brawl Arena because, I mean, we all know that even with the nerfs, Clancy level 3 is no joke. So getting level 3 in the first minute of a match that can potentially last 7 minutes, if I'm correct, it is a lot of value. And even though this is not, let's say, very competitive game mode, it did open a question that was very important. What if Clancy could get his level 3 faster? Making the levels less meaningful, but allowing you to get them faster could be the right move. Now, unfortunately, we didn't really get Broken Clancy for very long because just, I think, 2 weeks later, they removed the ability to get tokens out of bots, but the idea was still there of a Broken Clancy potentially very soon. Now, it was not soon for sure, at all. It took a long time for Clancy to receive his buff, but it did reach. So, on the 3rd of October 2025, Clancy would receive a couple of buffs. So now, to go from level 1 to level 2, it would take less 2 tokens, and to go from level 2 to level 3, it would take less 1 token, allowing Clancy to reach level 3 a little bit faster. As a compensation for the easiest tokens, the first star power now would only give 2 bonus tokens instead of 3 bonus tokens, which I personally think that's ridiculous. I always use the second star power and I will keep using the second star power regardless. Another buff that wasn't mentioned in the patch notes was actually a fix to his hypercharge, where apparently for some reason it seemed like the hypercharge super, if it went against the wall, the projectile got destroyed, where that would no longer happen. Essentially a very similar thing to what happened to Crow's hypercharge super for people that remember. And nowadays it's still a little bit unclear if Clancy is much better or much worse, but the reality is this change didn't do too much. With the help of the first gadget, it is very easy to get to level 3, but the problem is still on the enemy. If the enemy plays very passively, you will not get any value of your Clancy. This is why most of the times if you see Clancy, especially on ranked, it is mostly has a counter pick to one tank and maybe assassins as well. Because that's what Clancy is really good at. And he quite literally can't do anything else. And this is because his whole mechanic is around damage. And this is why his downfall had to happen. It's very simple. If a brawler whose entire mechanic is around pure damage, number one, that brawler will never be fun. That brawler will never be as popular as a brawler like Kenji or as Stu, for example. Because it is fun to cycle supers and to cycle abilities. But Clancy, again, it's only really damage. People get tired of just dealing damage very easily, believe it or not. That's why characters like Griff, even though they are busted in a couple scenarios, because they are mostly, Griff is not only used for damage, but mostly used for damage, a lot of people don't show interest in that type of character. And most importantly, if a character that can deal so much damage remained unchanged, that would completely change the meta to a point where damage inflation and HP inflation would be at its insane high. Not to mention that because Clancy at level 3 also had the fastest movement speed in the game, even though the nerf came at the wrong time, it was completely reasonable. Because if that didn't happen, that would actually imply that the fastest movement speed in the game was now Clancy's speed at level 3 and Draco's super. And that would cause, potentially, an insane speed inflation throughout the entire game, making characters like Otis, 8-Bit, Bonnie on the cannon form even worse than what they already were at that time, and characters like Max and Leon not as good. So it was for the greater good Clancy receiving these nerfs, because maybe in a completely different universe, every brawler would have an extra 1000 damage and extra 1000 HP, because Clancy at his release was just that strong.